acknowledging that today I'm hosting the webinar from the lands of the Kaurna people. And I'd also like to acknowledge that everyone joining us today are also joining us from various lands of South Australia. So I'd like to pay my respects to all the elders present, past and emerging, and would love to celebrate the diversity of First Nations peoples, their ongoing cultures, and their connections to the lands of our beautiful state, and as well as our waters. Now, before we get started, just a few housekeeping rules. Just make sure we'd love to engage with everyone who's here today. So we'll just make the most of all of our time, but just using that chat functionality. So we'll come to those questions in the last 5 to 10 minutes of the workshop today, but just feel free to pop any of those questions in the chat as we go along. Now, firstly, I'd like to congratulate everyone who's joining us today. You are obviously here because you've achieved finalist status for the SA Tourism Awards this year. It has been an incredibly different and challenging year. So to put up your hand and commit to the Tourism Awards this year has been, just such a feat for many. Achieving finalist status is a testament to not only your hard work on writing a 10,000 word submission, but also to your businesses and to your teams that all work hard every single day. So well done, everyone joining us today. And wishing you all the best of luck for the gala dinner, which we'll talk to a bit later on in the workshop. Now, I am joined by Steve Davis today from Taught Devout Marketing, which is a boutique marketing consultancy. Now, Steve comes to us with over 20 years of marketing consultancy experience, wears many hats, including workshop presenter, as we will see today, podcaster, video presenter, just to name a few. Steve is here to provide advice and some really handy tips today on how to best leverage your finalist status. So welcome so much, and thank you so much, Steve, for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
All right. Oh, that's my official go-ahead, is it? All right. Well, hi, everyone. And again, congratulations being finalists. That's awesome. I know some of you in this chat. I think the important thing to note for what I'm about to take us through is it's going to boil down to mindset. One of the things I do as a marketer is I'm often called upon to be the advocate of the consumer. I've got to look at you on behalf of the consumers, of our audiences, to sort of knock us out of our insular little world. We all have to do it. I have to do it with someone else when I need to do something for Talked About Marketing, because we're so close to our entities. So I'm hoping that I will kindly and gently prise us out of that little shell so that we can get some traction with any communication that we're planning. So let's hop straight into it, and please use that chat box to fire questions away, because in my journalism career, I also did a lot of talkback radio, so I'm used to being interrupted and even abused, but we won't go that way today. This quote here, I really think sets the scene for what we're about to do. It's the famous quote from Oscar Wilde, "My business is named after it." There's only one thing worse than being talked about, and that's not being talked about. And I just think this is something that is a mantra, and a worthy mantra in the realm of marketing, because no one's out there on our side to try and get our message heard by others. We have to do this ourselves. No one owes us their attention either. And so our job is to earn that. And we have to earn it by being interesting, by surprising people. And I haven't seen a lot of that just yet on the horizon relating to this upcoming awards night, or really any of them. So let's have a look at some examples of what I've seen. Now, this is where, please be gentle as I share this with you, but on my social feed over the past few weeks, I had to pinch myself to go, hang on, is this deja vu? because just about every single post I saw was identical. And I hope, well, I'm being the advocate of the consumer here. We've got the GAN's worthy contender. Please consider voting for us. We're a finalist. We're proud about that. We're excited about it. Hey, vote for us so we can win some more. We're proud to be a finalist, etc. There's a bit of a theme that's going across here. And so part of the mindset that I want us to develop and hone as a result of this time together is to think about what's in it for me as the recipient of this communication to make me want to do that. Let's have a look at another example of some more I found. We've got some different artwork on some of these. And it's all these messages about last days to vote. We're excited. We're finalists, and you can win a prize pack, something from a prize pack. And we look at, in particular, my eyes always drift down to the data at the bottom, how many people have commented or shared. And most of these posts have had very little in the way of engagements concerned. We look at Darrenberg's an example, we thought, oh, 54, that's amazing. But against the overarching number of the people in their world, that's a really tiny kicking up of the dust. So there's something going on here, a slight disconnect, and I want to just prize that apart in this first part of this presentation. In fact, let's go to a different sector altogether, and we can see that this is something that happens around award time. In the Food SA Awards, there's one here, La Casa del Formaggio. Hey, they're excited because they're in the top 20 consumer awards. And thank you to everyone in Food SA. But what about me, the person who buys their product? I'm being left out of this equation. And even this one we see sneaking in. Don't worry, I'm moving away from the negative territory in just a moment, but we've just got to get this clear to make sense of the rest of my presentation. This woman over in Perth who is congratulating sincerely her clients who have won these awards, and then straight away, hey, if you need help with your next awards, why don't you talk to me? And so there's this little feeding frenzy around this time, instead of, I think, channeling the purity and the valuable excitement that can come from this, and the heartfelt thanks that should be there for the people who have made our businesses viable in the first place. So that's what I want to get to. So let's have a look at this with some sort of context. I think that awards are absolutely important, and there's no doubt it's exciting to be in the awards spectrum. I've been there before, luckily, a few times, and you all are at the moment, and it's infectious internally. And the question is, how much can we bring along our people with us? Because what's in it for me is, or WIFM, as people say, is the radio station most humans tune to. Why should I care that you have won this? Which is a rather bleak way to think, but it's how most of us think, because there is so much demanding our attention in this life. And within the realm of social media, people who are slightly in our orbit might bless us with a little dusting of a like or a smiley face or whatever. Doesn't really move the needle, makes us feel a little bit good, but is negligible as far as ultimate impact into our business. So this one question, the what's in it for me, I think should be what sets the true north for any of our marketing communication around the awards process. And I don't want to throw shade on our parade. We've got to enjoy this, but there's how can they enjoy it with us? So there's definitely a lot in it for us when we win awards. For a long time into the future, if you happen to remain a finalist or pick up an award in the 2022 South Australian Tourism Awards, that will help me as a consumer down the track have faith that what you're doing is of a high pedigree. So that's a given. That's something that cannot be taken away from you now. And if being the finalist is where you peak for this year, that is still, from a marketing perspective, valuable, because it gives me a sense of trust as a consumer. It's a form of social proof, but it's come from studious judges inside the industry, and what they say is even a little bit more important than what the general public say, because they're judging you against criteria and it carries weight. There are some standard things that we expect people will go through and do around an awards. So I have highlighted the cookie cutter posts that I've seen all through my feed over the last few weeks. And, yep, there's like a standard thing. We have to do that. It's like seeing cars advertised these days with ABS brakes. Well, that used to be a feature back in the early days, but now it's just table stakes. We expect that to happen. These standard posts, we just have to do it. If you're old enough to remember the John Martin's Christmas pageant many, many years ago, there my age is revealed. After all the fun and glitter of the pageant came those drab green John Martin's vans right after Father Christmas. Most people paid no notice, but that was a little bit of marketing. It just had to happen. It's one of those things. But my focus today is on the people. Your customers in particular. They have to be the hero of our communication. And those of you who did one of the TIC-SA workshops I did for the people within the Business Alexandrina, we talked about storytelling, and the secret to having a story that sticks, when we were thinking about Superman in particular, was trying to isolate what was the kryptonite that he had to face, or we had to face. What is the headwind we had to fight against to actually survive this year and to triumph? And if we can share that, that's the bit that draws us in as storytelling and story receiving creatures, is what was it? That was the struggle we had to overcome, or the next level that we pushed ourselves to achieve. So I want to mine some of that as we get our head right as far as approaching some marketing communication. Rebecca, there are 3 types of messaging that I've noticed around awards. The fact stuff is what we're getting out of the way at the moment, and we do that. One thing you might have noticed, please reflect on this yourself, there's always going to be an exception to this, but most of the time, those ones that say, hey, we've done this, look at us, we're finalists, we get our in-crowd patting us on the back, and that's okay. It's hard work, and it's a nice way to just maintain that little relationship with a nice little bit of polite dusting. But the stuff that piques the interest of journalists that we might try to engage with, as well as members of the public, is the human angle, the human interest to our story. Is there a person internally who has gone extra, gone further to achieve, or is there a certain class or type of customer that you've bent over backwards to achieve to help them with a particular struggle or adversity they're facing with? These are the things that I'd love us to ponder, because every single person in this meeting, this webinar today, I will tell you right now, you're sitting on a gold mine of story angles. Even if they're not obvious to you yet, you are. There is a human element behind what you've achieved. It's just a matter of taking some time to think through in this way, with this lens. And at the third level of story, the one I think is very rarely tapped is finding a way to really make our customers the hero. How can we thank them? So in a way that's not cheesy or saccharine, but is actually earnest, when we really think profoundly about how much their choice to support us has made such a difference to our life and to the little ecosystem that we're part of. If we can help our customers feel a sense of ownership in our enterprise and pride for having been wise enough to choose us and to support us, we start building advocacy out there in the marketplace that will live well after this awards process has passed us by. And so taking this time to breathe, pause, and reflect on that, I think there's some gold waiting for us to mine. So here's our plan. This is what I want to get into. I want us to focus on our personas. I'll talk about that in a moment. Apply the digital formula that we use to any sort of marketing and communication. And then I want to share some of the principles in putting a media release together in a way that's more guaranteed to get traction. Nothing's overly guaranteed in this realm. I'll talk more about that as an ex-journo in just a moment. All right, let's start. Here they are. These are our people. These are our personas. And a persona here is that fictional representation of our ideal customer type, but not just in a generic way, but in a specific way. We've given them a name or names. We know them as entities. These are the people we need to communicate to because they're the ones who opt to choose us when they make their decisions. What we have to be thinking about if we want real cut through with our communication is, what do they care about our win? Is there something, is there some angle, is there some hook that makes them swirl with pride when they see or encounter our communication out here? Their experience, their memories. So let's have a look at this a bit more. Let's define this. There's a buyer persona, fictional representation of your ideal customer, and it goes beyond just the generalizations that we see in much of the marketing world. This bit here, though, is where we take the abstract concept of a persona and give you some ideas on the flavors of stories that you can use when you're creating some marketing communication. Many of you here will be familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's been around a long time. And it has value here in giving us, if you've ever imagined, scaling up the side of a cliff, which, I do all the time, trying to find somewhere where you can get a foothold or get leverage to climb up. That's what we're looking for. This little process might be one that helps you. So we're all driven by emotions when we make our decisions. And if anyone here is thinking, no, not me, I'm logical, I'm sorry, you are. We are all emotional creatures. Some of us are better than others at quickly layering over a logical veneer to make it feel like we've made a rational decision. But emotion's what gets us. And there are different types and levels of emotion that drive us to make a decision. And if there are two competing ones, the lower one is the one that dominates. So in our realm, tourism, awards, we're thinking of messaging around our being a finalist and hopefully winning. Here's an example. Is your entity one that satisfies a physiological need? So if you've got the sort of tourist venture, let's say it's a basic camping site area that people seek refuge in on endurance trails, well, that's where you are. That's something that you can tap into in your communication that's going to resonate with them. If we look at safety needs, you might have the sort of experience or accommodation place where outside of the hustle and bustle of maybe a strange big city or a place people don't get too much, you bring a sense of surety and comfort. You're a known quantity from which they can feel safe as they then start exploring something new. If you look at love and belonging, this might appeal to some of you. Perhaps I know a lot of caravan parks meet this need for people where there's regular people who come there time and time again and they get to know each other. There's camaraderie in the ranks, or you might be very good as a tourist operator at having strangers who have booked onto a tour, for example, and you're very good at meshing them together during the course of an event. That's something that many people resonate with. And esteem is probably the other one that has relevance for some of you. And that typically is where you are at the higher end of the market in a socioeconomic way, or you might be very virtuous in some eco way, that people feel good about being associated with you. Puff them out with their esteem when they're seen being associated with you. So please ponder this application of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It might just give you a fresh angle or a tone in the way that you approach any stories that you tell through media releases or speaking events that you might be asked to speak at now or in the future. Rebecca, we're very good here with our synchronization. This is a little worksheet that I use in some of my workshops just to flesh out what I mean by these personas. This is just an example. This is the sort of detail I need to have, is not just a name. And by the way, that's a terrible sketch that I just did of a human. The world of academic literature around design thinking, by the way, does say that if you are going to do personas, and which I really hope you do, like really hone them, having a stab at drawing them first actually aligns your thinking really clearly. You actually get closer to this human or these humans. So you don't have to show anyone, but it does help. So here I've got in the middle column some of the demographic data, Peter's age, family status, etc. It's the third column where the goodies are. How does Peter think? What governs the choices he makes? What's he worried about? What's he trying to achieve? So I won't keep going on about this because that's a whole different workshop to get into personas, but please, if you haven't done so, and the awards process does gear you up into that level of thinking, but if you can take it to this nth degree, it just makes everything easier when it comes to communication, because suddenly, instead of trying to win everybody on Facebook or TikTok or in the local press, you've got a particular person whose interest you're trying to engage. So if we're going to get serious now about trying to capture some attention and some leverage from these awards, we do have to put some time aside. I think that goes without saying. Budget, perhaps, if you're paying for lodging of media releases or even some advertising of your messages, or maybe even a stunt that you might hold if it's appropriate, but also working out the roles. Who is going to be responsible for what in taking the mantle of getting some stories told? I do think having one person who is coordinating everything is a good move, because there can be a lot of moving parts all of a sudden, and that one bit of coordination in one person's head is valuable. And look, for many of you who are solopreneurs, it is only going to be you, but just having someone who knows they do need to do some hard yards to make this happen and to be available outside normal business hours. I'm sure that doesn't shock anyone in this call, because we all do. We're all available around the clock, but more so, one thing I've noticed with my journalistic colleagues is we do get, how do I say this nicely, a little precious in that role, because we've got deadlines that we're working to that we just have to yield to. We can't ignore them. And so that means we do have to call you at 7:30 in the morning or 9 o'clock at night, if that's what it's going to take to get a story done. So the more we can accommodate there and not play hard to get, the better. Oops, I almost finished there, Rebecca. Can we just go back one? We're going to focus on the digital marketing formula in just a moment. I'm coming to that next. And then I wanted to talk through drafting media releases as well. Okay, I probably could have done that without the slide, but anyway, we had it there. Thank you, Rebecca. Let's move forward then. This is the digital marketing formula. Again, I can take ages on this, but I'm just going to whip through it lightly, because the focus of this sort of thinking about how do we get extra bang for our buck from being a finalist and winning an award, or potentially winning an award, does tend to settle around media releases and media, but we have to honor this first. This is the order of importance and impact that every bit of the digital marketing formula has. The website is absolutely key. Your website is the one thing that can never be taken away from you. The longer it's up, the more Google gets to trust and know your content and therefore refer it to people when they do searches. It's got to be the first place we think of when it comes to creating and storing and sharing original content. So we need that there, particularly in relation, for our purposes today, in number 3. So number 3 in this list is blogging. If we don't have a blog on our website yet, I really hope one day we can cross paths in one of the blogging workshops that I run. But blogs are that lovely mechanism of having short or long, but specific stories that you add to over time to help your personas make better decisions in thinking about how to use services or products like yours, how to get the most out of staying with you or using you, etc. And all this ancillary stuff, such as awards. We need this content on our blogs. It's one of the last things that Google says publicly will help them show you to other people in search. We need to be blogging. We need that discipline. We don't have to be doing it daily, but some sort of regular drumbeat of sharing helpful content is what helps Google play its role as the matchmaker in the sky for us. So anything that bubbles up idea-wise from today, I typically would be begging you to make it a blog first, because that effort goes to a place that will live forever. I have met people who have put their effort into either just a media release or just a newsletter. And once they're gone, there's a little bit of latency with the media release, but they've gone, whereas the blog is there forever. Now, part and parcel with that, the newsletter, which I hope you all have, and if you haven't, I can just tell you without naming names, we did work last year with a caravan park in a regional area who had never sent a newsletter in the 10 years of operation they'd had. And they had something like 3,000 email addresses. They'd never once tapped any of those people on the shoulder to let them know about any of the improvements they've made. And when we sent out a little survey to ask people their recollections of this caravan park, most said, oh yeah, we've been meaning to go back, but totally forgot. So newsletters play an important role just keeping us front of mind. And so anything that we come up with that is first of all blogged should then be shared with our people in our newsletter. And then we've got ads and our social media content. The reason that's at the end is the social media stuff is very light and dusty, and it comes and it goes really quickly. And if it's not geared up to seed engagement, have people dig in and tuck in and share thoughtful comments, it does come and go without much payoff on the bottom line. In fact, one of my colleagues, who is the nerd, has done the sums on that from all of his experience. He says about a 40-to-1 payoff, the effort you get from a solid newsletter that's actually interesting versus effort put into social media. That's another story for another day. So there's the general digital formula. So we're going to talk now about media releases, but remember that I want this content to be captured on your website. If we just expand out the digital formula a little bit, what I'd be doing right now is, after this, sitting down, thinking through some different story ideas, and then what images we might need to back them up, what videos we could make to support and capture the essence of whatever angles we come up with in our story generation. I've mentioned the blog and the newsletter. Media release, we're about to get to. There's a couple of spins on media release, but here's something else just to make sure, a quick checklist. Yes, we want this mentioned on our website. So at the moment, I hope you've already got the Finalist artwork somewhere on your website. Have you updated your Australian Tourism Data Warehouse entry? There's no time like today. Your Visitor Information Centre. I luckily was emceeing their conference earlier this year, and these people are good humans who want to be matchmakers to help people connect with you. And so a little bit of effort spent in building your relationship with whomever you've got in your visitor information center is time well spent. And what better reason than to, hey, oh, guess what? We're now a finalist. And what this might mean for people as you recommend different options. You've got A, B, and C, but here you are C, and you're a finalist. There's a bit of proof that you're good at what you do. I'd also be contemplating, as we think about our customers and what's in it for them, is there a special campaign or offer that could be appropriate right now that has a celebratory tone to it? I just park that as a thought. It's another reason maybe not to give anything away, but maybe something extra gets added to people if they're booking in during this campaign. And the other thing, of course, email signatures. It doesn't hurt to add this to the email signature, just as that little bit of backing up the fact that they've chosen the right person to make an inquiry through as they read your email. Okay. It just plays at the subconscious level. And of course, suppliers. We don't need to go too much publicly as far as our suppliers are concerned, but if you've got key suppliers, especially if it's hard during these times of COVID interruptions to, you need them maybe more than they need you, etc. Anything you can do to just keep that conversation warm in teasing up what this might mean to them, that they're not just supplying another business, they are supplying a business that has great credibility, that judges have said is really at the top of the pops, then that's a great excuse. If you haven't thought about that yet, I'd be wanting to use this as a way to thank them for helping enable you to do what you do. There might be something that depends on your relationship with them. It might be a way to embellish a relationship. Now, I just parked that thought there. Suppliers are part of the equation too. All right. So media releases, journalism. When I was trained as a journalist, the simplest way to understand what makes something newsworthy is man bites dog. It's gendered language. It does come from the early 1920s, but what it's saying there is the ready reckoner, the rule of thumb that we have to use before we put time and energy into putting out a news release. A dog bites a human, yeah, no one really cares except for the person bitten, of course. But a human bites a dog, that's unexpected. That's the novelty. That's what's new. That's what's unexpected. And this is what we're looking for. I was talking to Rebecca before we went on, just reliving some of my time spent in a newsroom, and you just see so many news releases. They used to come in on fax machines back in those days. Now they just come in, there's piling up the inbox. That headline, the idea, the hook has to be good. If we think of this man bites dog, what can we do that's unexpected? That's the thing that's likely to grab some attention. And as far as thinking about media is concerned, we're not just talking about the advertiser or in daily. There's local press, local messengers perhaps, or smaller papers in other parts of South Australia. National press might actually be relevant to you, depending on the nature of your business and whether there are any important trends happening nationally. So, for example, if you do a lot of things with produce from the river at this time when the River Murray is flowing at a rate of knots and higher than ever, there might be something that dovetails into that could get extra attention at this time. Industry journals are really worthwhile just to get you known, especially if by you being better known in these journals, it helps people refer people your way. Sometimes an industry journal is an easier goal to score because they're always on the lookout for content within their industry. Again, it still has to be man bites dog, but they're pre-warmed to wanting to capture something from their world. Please don't write off podcasts. If you are a podcast listener, you're already a step ahead because you're in that culture. But if not, having a bit of a search around for podcasts that your personas might listen to that are relevant. As a podcaster myself, I'm always got my ear to the ground for guests that I could have on. And especially Man Bites Dog's got to be of interest to the style of my podcast, but ears are always open. And the thing about approaching a podcaster to be a guest is the nature of podcast listeners is you actually feel a much closer, warm connection to the podcaster and their guests. And so you're there, you're intimately right in their ears. And so I really encourage you to explore that option. I can talk more about that time permitting towards the end if you want to drill down. But for example, I was at an event in Port Adelaide last night, and there's I think it's called the Dockside Festival or the Dock Festival in Port Adelaide later this year. And the gentleman running that, I mentioned to him, the Adelaide Show podcast, which I do, we might be interested in doing live podcasting from that event as something a bit special to help them in their first year. He's emailed back today saying, well, didn't get much of a chance to talk last night, but he's a massive listener to podcasts, so he's keen to explore it. It's just a nice extra bonus you get to get in front of people who are passionately gathered around a topic. And especially if I look at the last point on this slide, special interest groups, there are specialist publications, specialist blogs, specialist podcasts that hone in on particular groups of people. I've put four-wheel drive as an example there. If your entity taps into people of a particular ilk, a particular hobby or interest, then please make sure you exploit that avenue, because there's an audience waiting to eat things up. And even if they don't directly book from you or through you, you get known and in their world get talked about later. Here's 3 quick examples I got from around the place. You will have a slight advantage for a more pedestrian story to get covered. I'm just talking behind the scenes, inside journalism talk now, okay? Just a good bread and butter story here. The Messenger, Mount Gambier, their caravan park in the southeast won a National Award of Excellence. It's not really prime time news in the general scheme of things, but the local angle is what saved it. And the journalist there, Arj, picked up on the angle that it was during COVID. They did some enhancements to get ready for borders opening. And so they got a lovely free kick in that publication. Now, did that publication get mass coverage to people who might travel there? Not necessarily, but there's one trick. I didn't actually plan to, I'd forgotten about this. This is a key thing to understand with anything to do with media, whether it's a podcast interview or a blog talks about you or 5AA have a chat with you on a weekend. It doesn't matter who actually read or listened to it at that time. Capture it some way, whether it's the audio, whether it's a screenshot, whatever, and share that afresh, because there's a lot of theatre in this realm of media coverage. Just mentioning the fact that you were on 5AA or you've been featured in this podcast, blah, blah, people make that out to be bigger and more special than it might have actually been. But the theatre is there and you can play along with that. It's part of the fun of this publicity game, of this journalism game. So if you do get mentioned, so if I was running Pine Country Caravan Park, I'd be mentioning it as featured in the press, maybe or maybe not mention that it was Messenger. But, it's just creating that just helps subliminally us as a potential customer to go, oh, okay, there must be something there if the media is shining attention on them in a nice way. The middle slide here is an industry magazine, The Shout, bars, drinking, etc. They've just done a focus on a human. within their industry. And the one at the end I've thrown on there is actually from Queensland, where the minister did a press release on a new tourism venture because that venture benefited from some funding that the government made. So if at some point during the last year, you've had a partner in some way collaborate with you, it could be government, could be private enterprise, it could be a not-for-profit group, whatever it might have been, consider involving them in the story or helping them be equipped so that they can get some coverage about what they've done to help you, because it still helps you in the end, but it honors their involvement, and it's another angle, it's another bite of the cherry. All right, so let's look at the anatomy of a media release now. Before we get to the absolute specifics, who is this going to impact? This is the big what's in it for me question. And our persona is the key person or types of people we're trying to focus on. And this is where the value of having someone specified pays off, because it's much easier to think about a particular person, go, oh, what would interest them, than try and talk to the every human. So the man bites dog, what is it that's new or novel here? For example, just literally before I came on, a client of mine up in Darwin, who's an electrician, said, ants have gone crazy here and they're eating all the wiring. So I've drafted, I think there's a story in this for a bit of drama with NT News, because they love a good tacky story. And we've got ants on the march destroying it. We've just got a quick little media release we're going to throw out there because it's got that novelty. Ants so tiny, but here they are on the march. I shared that to get you inside the thinking of looking for that little bit of story pizzazz in what is just a routine thing that he's experiencing. Where is it happening? The location often can make a difference, especially for local journals, but sometimes it's unique. It's the fish out of water. So here is a small entity in a small part of South Australia, and they're giant killers. They're mixing it with someone from the big end of town. There is human interest in that sort of battle. And of course, what's the call to action? What would you like people to be doing as if they happen to read this media release or this story? I mean, the media release, you want the journalist to cover it, but is there something embedded in there that the journalist can use to get us to do something? Is there a scarcity in your industry and you've got to act quickly? With the Darwin one, we're getting people to go out and make sure they have their ant rid and their protection around their gate motors, etc. So what is it that someone can do when they hear this news? Here it is. These are the elements, and it's as simple and as complicated as this. So the headline is key. A couple of things to note with headlines of a media release. You've really got to have as few words as possible. We can't go too flowery here, and we shouldn't at the same time sweat it and make us paralyzed from sending, because a typical journalistic outfit will rewrite the headline anyway. They'll come up with their own. We just need to, if you think of the old-fashioned rockets they used to send up out of space, and they get out of the atmosphere, then one stage of it falls back to Earth. So the headline's job, its only job, is to make the journalist go, oh, what? That's it. And then that gets jettisoned away. It's done its job. Then we have the lead, which is the opening sentence. That's really critical. We need to capture the story in this one sentence. Again, no fluffery. Let's hit with the strongest bit first. And that, if we get past that stage then goes back to Earth, and then we're in orbit. They will make contact with us, or in reality these days, just rewrite our media release and use it as it is, which is fine. So before I go much further, headlines. There is some talk of using embargoes sometimes, which is where you have a headline, but then you write embargoed until November 3, 2022. Please don't do that. at all. Unless the only proviso is if you have a really good relationship with your journalist and you've spoken to them beforehand and they've agreed to it, because no one is duty bound to honor that. And if it is important that no one spills the beans before a certain date for whatever reason, don't put it out until then, and then make sure that your media release gets sent out when they can run with it. It's a little bit of an overhang from the past, and it's just bad practice. It makes journalists a little bit annoyed more than anything. So that's the embargo. So the headline, nice and strong, short, 10 words, 15 words, less is best, but not abstract. This is not the time for being flowery and Shakespearean. We want to know man bites dog, boom. That itself would be a great headline. The lead is the whole story in one sentence. So forget everything your primary school teacher taught you about writing stories with a beginning, a middle, and an end. No time for that. We use the inverse pyramid in journalism. So give us the whole story in the first sentence. And then typically I've got quotes there next. Then once you've got XYZ story says, and then a name and the business, that's your opening, then we can move to some quotes, some active voice in quote marks of you in a hopefully not jargonistic corporate voice, actually cutting to the chase to set it up and to share something snackable, media snackable, interesting for us to go, oh, that's interesting. That would be a good quote for a journalist to use. Now, proper journalists won't use any of this. They'll end up interviewing you properly, but there are some entities out there who will just make use of what you've got, so you might as well put some good quotes in there. Again, happy to take questions on this before we finish. Once we've got a couple of active voice quotes, then we can finish off with a sentence or two that might need to backfill the general dotting the I's and crossing the T's. Such and such business, winner, this category, 2022 South Australian Tourism Awards, the basics. And then the really big thing is you want ENDS, E-N-D-S, capitals, bold, once you finish the story, and the contact information comes immediately after that. We want names, titles, email address, and a mobile phone number or two. We need that, because if we are going to run a story, we need to get to you ASAP. And so that just goes without saying. Don't have that, or you want to funnel it through a third party, that just can be annoying. And it just depends. There are some businesses for whom we want and need them more than they want or need us. So unfortunately, it's a bit like a child's playground. When we're the ones who desperately need their attention, then we need to make it as easy as possible for journalists. A few quick examples, just three from newsmaker.com.au, which is a service I use for putting out news releases. The good, I liked this. Billionaire.au domains acquired by founder of digital identity startup. So I was curious, because in my world, the AU domains, which are a pain in the butt, and I'm happy to talk to anyone about this, this guy has bought up all the names like Reinhardt.au to make the point that people aren't looking after their reputations online. If I was in my journalistic newsroom, that would be a story. I'd follow up. That hooked me. The next one is a little bit harsh to be saying bad. It's middle of the road more so, but I was going with good, the bad, and the ugly. Australian studies show significant side effects from anabolic steroid use. Interesting. But when I read the opening, it just seemed a bit wriggle roomish. It sort of defused the bold claim a little bit in my first reading. And so I thought, they've just thrown this out there to try and get a nibble. And now they're backing back from the boldness of their claim. So a little bit of cognitive dissonance there. And then the ugly, I still have not read this to the end. The headline, Society passed NASDAQ SOPA Thoughtful Media Group Strategic Partnership. I can't even do it now. Blur. Yes. Oh, I can see Marcia just shaking her head there. All right. So let's move on. I can't see that anymore. Thank you. So anatomy of a media release. First of all, a few things to remember. Most of them will rewrite your headlines. Short is good. And what's in it for them is not just our personas, it's for the media. I was lucky enough to interview Peter Gresti recently. He is the Australian journalist who was wrongfully jailed in Egypt on trumped up charges for 400 days. And he was saying he said, you don't know this, do you? In the modern newsroom today, they have a scoreboard on the wall with all the current live stories showing the number of hits each story is getting. And that's how the journalists are judged. So they need hit candy. So what is it about your story that's going to help them craft something that will get us clicking like and getting engaged or whipped up into a frenzy? As far as getting it covered, look, having personal contacts among the media is always useful. If you don't, then newsmaker.com.au is a great service, Adelaide-based company, costs about $44 to send out a media release where you can choose the types of news outlets you want. So do you want TV, radio? Do you want fashion, travel? You know, you can tick some of the, but you pay an extra amount for each different category type. So you can end up spending 80, 120, whatever. But that will then go to specific journalists as well as being put live on their website, which is, indexed by Google News. So it's a great little service, and it's an Adelaide service. So newsmaker.com.au. I think that Shay just asked a question about where do we send these. There's your answer, Shay. By doing that, that takes care of all of it. Of course, I also want this to then be turned into a blog on your website, don't forget, and then later sent to your people through the newsletter. I seriously spent a few minutes because I know that, is it Cafe de Groot? It was one of the people who are finalists. So I just went, oh, what would I do? And I don't know anything about anything. I just said ideas of headlines. Port Elliot Coffee Roaster scores double shot at, oops, I got these in my way here, at South Australian Tourism Awards. You know, that's a nice one. South Australia's coffee culture puts South Coast Roaster on tourist map. I'm just upping the ante a little bit there. And cafe crawls have judges buzzing in South Australian Tourism Awards. Now, if this is based on reality, then there's a hook. Have we switched? Are people planning their holidays around where they get good coffee from? Because there's a man bites dog. Because until recently, it's been gin, and before that it was beer, before that it was wine. So I was just playing with some ideas of headlines to grab people's attention, or journalists' attention, and or my blog readers' attention. So a couple of other things worth noting. If we're going to approach this from a media show and tell perspective, a bit of social content planned for the night, having a few things drafted, even if they're not scheduled posts, but you've drafted an email to yourself, some snippets of text. And if you've loaded on your phone, some photos that you can use apart from any photos you might take at an event, that just makes it a lot easier to shoot something out. You might even be bold enough to do a live stream on Facebook. One of my dear clients who does ghost tours and has won a number of awards is famous for doing some live streams from the tourist night. One word on that, I would probably do them before too much celebratory drinking has taken place. If you don't get a chance to talk on the night, hey, recreate it. Do a little speech the next day. Do a little reflection in situ, again, for our persona, not just navel gazing about us, but how can we really thank them for making this possible? And the people's lives you can then touch because they're supporting you and you're feeding your ecosystem. And of course, signage doesn't hurt to have this noted that you are the winner or the finalist. If you're really cheeky, you could put 2002 South Australian Tourism Awards attendee as a sign up the front of your product. But no, you're all finalists, so at least you'll have finalist as a sign. That's covered most of the things. It's mindset, though. I'm just going to finish on this before I take any questions. It is mindset. We are going to care a lot more about this than our personas do. So the responsibility is on us to do the extra work so that we can ponder why they might care, what is in it for them with us doing this. There will always be enduring value after the buzz. This has long-term value for your business. The fact that you're a finalist and or a winner, and that will always have some cachet, as they say. Mind you, I have stayed in a motel that did have a sign up saying they had won an award, and it was like 15 years ago. They probably do have a use by date, but it's a good sign. I think you got at least 4 or 5 years out of an award. And you've done all the work, 10,000 words or thereabouts. Buried in there somewhere will be some thought starters and some ideas and some wording that you can use. So that I'm a great believer in repurposing as much as possible. So there's a good starting point for some seeding content.
Great. Thank you so much, Steve. We'll open up to questions now. We had one from Shay, which I feel like you answered very well and in a very timely manner. But do we have any more questions in regards to anything that Steve touched upon today from our finalists? It's pretty.
I'm trying to read Anita Robbins' face. It's just, I'm never going to play poker against them.
Great. Well, if there's no other questions, I will pass on the recording from today's session, along with the slides. Steve, if you're happy to pass on your email as well, if any questions do pop up in anyone's minds, and I'm happy to share some contact details too. But thank you, Terry, for that really great comment, very comprehensive. Appreciate your insight. So thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you.
So thank you, everyone, particularly Steve, for your time and your knowledge that you've shared with us today. And thank you to all the finalists who have joined us today. Make sure, if you haven't booked your tickets to the gala dinner, you have to RSVP by the 25th of October. And I'm sure there's some great social content behind that as well that you can really leverage in terms of your finalist status. So please make sure you book your tickets. It's not too late, still got a bit more time, but do that as soon as you can. And hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and good luck for the awards. Thank you so much, everyone. See ya.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Steve.